Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's panel discussion, Finding the Fit, Putting Purpose to Work in B2B. And I am joined today by a number of leading experts in B2B marketing. Joining us from New York, so still taking in the caffeine, and thank you very much for doing this early call, is Ty Heath, who's co-founder of the B2B Institute at LinkedIn. And secondly is Thomas Kolster, author of Goodvertising and the Hero Trap, a speaker and a marketing activist. So look forward to hearing more about that activism later. And Dave Vann, owner of Said and Done and Purpose 9 and a member of MarketingKind. I'm Elaine Roberts. I'm also a member of MarketingKind and a former B2B CMO. For anyone who's new to MarketingKind and would like to know more about it, it's a community using marketing to change the world for better. And if you're not yet a member and would like to find out more, please visit marketingkind.org. With that said, let's get into this. So today we're talking about purpose, and purpose used to be the North Star. It was a way that many companies differentiated. It was their rallying cry and the way they proved their value beyond just talking about profit. But as we come into 2025, that landscape has shifted. A lot of businesses, which we read about every day in the media, are facing a backlash. Purpose has almost been politicized. A lot of leaders are nervous, and some boards would rather stay quiet. And yet silence is risky too. In B2B, especially, trust, resilience and long-term value are now on the line. So the question we're posing today is, how do we talk about purpose in a way that brings more reward and less risk? And that's the tension that will frame our discussion. But just before we start, I thought it might be helpful to clarify a couple of points. First of all, when we think about the size of the organization, we're mostly focusing on SMEs and corporates, not big multinationals. By purpose, we're framing it more in the context of brand and marketing and less in the sense of corporate purpose. We'll be referencing research, and especially Dave will be referencing research from the Purpose Reckoning that his agency Said and Done have just completed along with MarketingKind. And in that, the research defines purpose as your company's reason for being beyond making money, the positive impact you have on the world. So today is really about a practical discussion. It's much more about hands and not heads. But just before we start, we thought we'd offer a provocation and ask you a couple of questions about what you think purpose is. So a poll should now be appearing on your screen, and there it is. And the first question is, when it comes to your B2B brand, what's the current approach to purpose? And then the second question is, what stops you putting purpose to work for your B2B brand? If you can vote now, that would be great. I'll just give that a minute.
We're not able to vote. That's just how democracy works, right? So I just got to sit there, look at the questions. We're so close to
Thomas,
kind of
I
getting
was trying
my
to
vote.
click it before I
Yeah.
realized.
We don't want you to bias the outcome of the votes, Tom.
Fair enough.
We're too influential.
Brilliant. So hopefully you've all had a chance to vote. So Katie, I wonder if we could see the results, please. Look at that, loud and proud at 69%, dialing it up at 15%. So that's fantastic. I wonder if we can just scroll down so I can see what brands, maybe I can do it this way. Here we go. And what stops you putting purpose to work for your B2B brand? Oh, I've got a mixed here, a couple of 33%. So we're worried about the risks of taking a stance and being vocal. And that's 33, along with we're not sure which messages are right for which audiences and settings. And then 2 at 22, the business isn't really focused on purpose and social impact. And we're not really sure how relevant this is to our customers. So I think we've got a great opportunity to explore some of those paradigms as we go through the questions. So we talked about it being about hands, not about heads. So perhaps we'll start by asking, who's doing it really well at the moment, or who's doing it badly, in your opinion? If you can give us some examples of purpose done right. Thomas.
Oh yeah, what a time for purpose, right? In some ways I think it's been the best year for purpose ever, right? I don't think we've ever had a someone on the other side of the pond who is so interested in marketing as the current president. Logo design, there's so many things he has an opinion about. So I'm quite happy about all of this, right? Because it didn't really seem to be that much up on the agenda. Uh, I'm quite happy that you framed it along the lines of sort of the smaller, so the SME markets rather than the big ones, because I do think that for in the business to business spaces, there's so much opportunity, right? I mean, there's so much chance to excel. I mean, depending on what market you're operating in, if you're in Europe, obviously these things are pushing ahead still. I think there's so much opportunity for brands to differentiate themselves. A bit unfairly, I will actually give an example from my own neck of the woods. Not London today, but Copenhagen, where I'm originally from. It is a company called Velux. So basically, what they do is they do sky roof windows, and there's sort of like a little hint in the name because Velux actually stands for from Latin ventilation and daylight. And one of the things I think they do really, really well is to activate that purpose. Because if you think about it, I mean, they do windows, it's carpentry, uh, and yet they have a report that they do every year and have been doing that for I think 12 years now, which is called the Healthy Home Barometer. And they also expanded that more into sort of schools and institutions. And what the measure there is actually, in fact, um, let's call it the quality of life indoor. And obviously for me being a Dane and pretty new in UK houses, I could definitely see there's a bit of work to be done. uh, but I think what they do so well is that when they do that and they do that type of reporting, if you're a school, if you're a public institution, if you are about to make your new headquarters, and you are to choose between Velux, which is priced quite high in the market compared to Fakro, which is out of Poland, you you kind of want to buy into that extra added benefit, right? That you understand has a company that adds um, value to your employees, and 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 so for me, it's always how you frame purpose, and so this is probably where I wasn't really always agreeing on the framing of purpose not being aligned with value, because I always think that that is where it goes wrong. If it's not aligned with value, what is that then in the realm of business? So I think Velux actually gets this right on both sides. It's a
Thank you.
good example.
Great. Really enjoying the sort of social science of how people live and the value it adds to their life. Ty, what's an example from you of good or bad?
Yes, thank you. First, I just want to say thank you for convening this because clearly there's value. And I think most people are here because they're trying to figure out where does it fit? How do I wield it? So I super appreciate being a part of the conversation today. I'll give two larger examples I think people will recognize, but maybe not know. Maybe not be aware of the investments these companies are making. So one is Salesforce. So they do some integrated purpose work. They have a 1-1-1 model. It's 1% equity, 1% product, and 1% of employee time that's dedicated to philanthropic causes. And so they've done this through every ups and downs, economic downturns. It's effective because they've made the commitment, but it's operationally embedded also. So it's not just marketing rhetoric, it's a part of how they operate. And then another example that I found was UPS. So they have a big logistics company. What they've done is committed to carbon neutrality by 2050. They have one of the largest alternative fuel vehicle fleets globally. And it's not just announcements, they're actually converting thousands of delivery vehicles to do this. So point being here that I want to underscore is there's research from Ehrenberg Bass that points to this idea that only 18% of consumers can identify the stated purpose of these brands. So whether it's sustainability or social impact, yet there's like a fierce loyalty here. So I think the critical thing is that purpose doesn't need universal awareness to work. It just needs to be real, right? And so I know we'll dig into that a little bit more, but there's a lot to be gained for brands that invest in it in that more embedded way. So I'm sure we'll get there.
Great, thank you. So I love that, making it real, and maybe we can unpack a bit more. You said at the start, not many people know about this. So again, how much do brands talk about it and how much do brands not talk about it, which I think we just saw in the survey results. So perhaps we can come back to that as we explore later in the panel. Dave, you've recently back from research. What's your take on who's doing it well and not so well?
I think if we're gonna talk about who's doing it well and badly, it might be helpful to frame or distinguish between two different types of purpose. So a little bit crudely, if you'll permit me, I think there are two different types. I think there's intrinsic purpose and extrinsic purpose. So intrinsic purpose where some positive impact benefit is being had that's directly connected to the core product or service, and extrinsic benefit where that impact, that company may be doing many good, great things that they might want to shout about, but it isn't directly connected to the core product service business model. And my sense is that when it goes wrong, it's often the bad examples are often those extrinsic purpose examples where they just overstretch and they try and leap over that disconnect. And you as a customer, or we as a customer, just end up slightly scratching our heads. I'm not going to call out names, but I'm going to give some examples. Web agencies that claim that it's all about climate change. And you just kind of do a little double take. Okay, I love that you're doing something about climate change, but is that really what it's all about? Is that really your core purpose? The credit card company that's all about financial inclusion. Okay, again, great that they're doing some stuff about that, but the SaaS product that's all about social inequality, and that's not to say that those companies shouldn't be doing those things and those brands shouldn't be talking about them, but I think that's sometimes where again, some of the consumer backlash and the eye rolling happens because we sort of look at it and go, "Oh, okay, is that really absolutely core? That's really the thing that you're absolutely here for." So that's kind of where the disingenuous part comes in, and I'll mention this later on with our research. I think a lot of the good examples, I thought those examples you mentioned were great, Ty. I think a lot of the best examples are those intrinsic ones where actually the purpose is so core to the product or service. There is no overstretch. There is no overpromise, overselling. To your point, Thomas, the value's kind of baked in. The leadership training company that matches graduates with underprivileged college kids for training purposes. The customer service agency that trains up asylum seekers to be customer care handlers. Like these are examples of these are SMEs that we work with or supported know of, where it's totally baked in, right? And I think that's one of the beautiful things about purpose within B2B. There's a lot you can do with it that really kind of ties it back to the core product or service, and it doesn't have to always feel quite so removed.
Thanks, Dave. I'm going to stay with you for the next one. We've just heard about, in the survey, people said they don't want to shout about it. And we heard from Ty that some businesses are doing it, but nobody knows about it. Are businesses stepping back from talking about it, or is it a reframing? And in that, what is driving that pressure to do something differently?
Yeah, so I'll very briefly just share a few slides from our research because I think it absolutely speaks into what's the moment that we're in right now. And we called it the purpose reckoning really because that's what we heard was going on from leaders, that there is a bit of a reckoning moment happening around purpose. One of those insights was the reality that, yes, UK businesses have caught the back cold, if you like, from their US counterparts. When we asked leaders if they felt their company was dialing back on social environmental issues, specifically within external comms, 47% said yes. Interestingly, you are having two very different experiences of this, depending on your exposure to the US market and your company size. If you are sitting here right now as a leader or a brand manager, marketer for an SME brand that doesn't have shareholders, employees, investors in the US, you don't need to really be worried. Like why wouldn't you carry on being vocal, being loud and proud if you have so far? I guess the size and the US connection is where some of those risks are coming in, and where we're hearing business leaders say things like this, and capturing a little bit of, yeah, some of the wariness around being particularly vocal, being particularly spoken on, being known for standing out on issues like DE&I and environment. So I think leaders recognize that purpose can be divisive, disconnected, and performative. So I guess that kind of relates to my point about some of the bad examples. So when we asked leaders, okay, in what way has the company gone too far at times around purpose? These were the answers they gave. There was no one standout issue. I mean, perhaps not surprisingly, polarizing political. That's kind of where perhaps most of the wariness was coming from, and leaders were saying, "Oh, perhaps we've unintentionally become polarizing or political, and we didn't mean to, but maybe that's what some of the effect that's happened with some of the issues that we've spoken out on, issues employees aren't interested in, disconnected from the core business." Too much talk, not enough action. It's still an issue, whether you call it greenwashing, purpose washing, impact washing, that wariness of, oh, do I really need to pull a campaign together on this? How big are we going to go on this if we can't really back it up? So all of these things are kind of in the mix for leaders, and particularly the employee piece. We heard that a lot. A concern around, oh, right, we really need to follow through. It needs to be authentic, it needs to be sincere, because employees are watching, and they're the ones that are that's where the sort of the first line of defense, if you like. But leaders also know that retreat comes with consequences. So what we weren't getting is this sense of, oh, it's all too risky, it's become a little too fraught. We should back down, and hey, I'm sure that's the right thing to do, and there won't be any consequences to that. So when we asked, leaders, what might the future implications be for dialing back? Well, here's what they said. Over 50% of leaders recognized issues with talent attraction, retention, loss of alignment with internal values, reputational damage, loss of trust. Like, leaders are really aware of it's not just a case of, oh, the no risk option is to go quiet or not talk about issues because they might offend someone, or that might be a little bit not in keeping with the socio-political times. Like, no, there's risks to going quiet as well. I think that this quote kind of captures that quite succinctly. If you go quiet, does it make you look weak and insincere? And I guess I think that's the kind of pervading question that we were left with from the research, is actually, do you want to be remembered as a brand, a business that was weak and insincere when the tide shifts again and we're in a different moment? Or do you want to be remembered as one that was actually quite principled and consistent? And I think that's where a lot of these are just trying to work out, where do you draw the line and where do you hold it?
Thank you, Dave. Thomas, I wonder if we can just follow up on that. Where do you see this risk of internal caution outweighing external risk? What's the balance there?
I mean, again, let's be honest. I think that where there's a risk is where purpose hasn't been well implemented. To be honest, I do actually see in SMEs an amazing opportunity for living purpose, and especially now when a lot of big businesses are. And let's be honest, it's a lot more difficult for a big business because of complex supply chains, global reach. Probably, let's be honest, the multinational structure probably weren't made for purpose. I think we've seen that with a lot of brands, Ben and Jerry's, just to name one recent examples, Body Shop and lots of others. So it's very, very difficult to live purpose in the world of big business. And that's actually the real advantage of small businesses. And so I do see a lot in any given industry where you can stand out and serve a very specific audience on purpose very well. And also, especially in the environmental space, if you are a supplier of ingredients or packaging or whatever, you are part of that total carbon footprint. So if it's for you to deliver on that and to minimize your carbon footprint, that's the core of what you do, whether you're a SaaS company or whatever you are. I saw an email provider, a challenger to MailChimp the other day that came knocking on my door, and I was like, yeah, amazing. I don't like MailChimp in the first place anyways. Now I got a company where I can actually cut my carbon emissions as well. It's a really nice added benefit, more or less same price. Fantastic. So I do actually think that this might actually be the real opportunity for a lot of these SMEs. I wrote about in my second book, The Hero Trap, this challenge that for a lot of the SMEs, we see high growth, and especially in the purpose-driven ones. And so this is where there's a real growth opportunity. It's much more difficult for the multinationals to pull through on this. So, I think innovate, expand, be vocal. That's probably my best advice in this time.
Brilliant, thank you. Dave, from the research, you've presented the research. What's your own thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think Thomas is absolutely right. There's a role, there's a place for purpose within each of those brands, each of those businesses, and it's the through line, if you like, from core product, service, employees, something that's meaningful for employees, something that's relevant for customers, something that helps in things like tenders and bids. And I think that's where, yeah, both. It's interesting. Your point around SMEs is absolutely right, Thomas. The risks and complexities are less, and therefore the possibilities and the potential to unlock, or the potential to unlock the power, if you like, of purpose is so much more, is so much more there for SMEs. And I think if you're a B2B SME, like seriously, if you're a B2B SME and you're not seriously thinking about how purpose can be really useful for your business, for employee engagement, brand recognition, differentiation, growth, like you should be, because I think all the signs point to that it really can be.
Brilliant, thank you. So from both of you, we've heard what this opportunity is. Let's zoom in a little bit more, if that's not too bad a pun. Ty, what do you really see then is the role of purpose within a brand?
Yeah. And just to comment briefly, I do think the breakdown is when there's dissonance, right? Where you're leading with purpose, but you're not delivering operationally. So more people that are doing well are doing more than declaration, less talking, more doing, I think is like a critical thing to underscore. But to answer the question, there are three things I think that people should really be thinking about when we think about the role of purpose. So earlier I said there's research that showed that people weren't even aware of the purpose that these brands are investing in. But there are people that are aware and do care, and they find that when they're doing the research. So buyers who care about those values will discover that when they're researching options. So even if you don't have 100% awareness, you do need to be findable by the 20 to 30% of people who are actively filtering their decisions. Second, in B2B, as we all well know, there's a lot of risk in the decisions. Like there's more emotion. You're buying a $100 million analytics platform, not a t-shirt. So there's a career-proof rationale also that we should be thinking about. So we have buyability research at LinkedIn. B2B buyers prioritize defensible decisions over product and price. So this is something where there's a buying committee. 18 months later, they need to justify the decision, and they say, hey, we chose the company that was carbon neutral. That's stronger than we chose based on features. And then there's a third area. It's about long-term loyalty and advocacy. And so there is research that shows that purpose-driven companies grow faster. People are more connected and loyal. But I just want to dive into this a little bit more because when you think about how buyers are making decisions, they're actually eliminating options. So when a buyer asks a colleague, have you heard of company X? The response that they're giving is often including values judgments. So you might hear them say, yeah, but didn't they have that scandal? Or they could say, they're the ones doing that sustainability work. So the place of purpose it's actually acts as a screening mechanism. And people may be filtering you out before you even know they existed. So we just need to use it to think about it in terms of avoiding disqualification. Think about it in terms of people don't need to know about it up front, but you don't want to be caught on the wrong side of it when it matters. So it's a tiebreaker. It's becoming more important too when you think about the Gen Z audience and how they're making decisions as well. And then I guess I would just again underscore the post-purchase rationalization that people do. Because again, like that 95% of buying decisions is happening subconsciously, and the logical, like you find the rationale for that decision you made after the fact. So this isn't theoretical. It's like making socially responsible choices is bringing satisfaction and emotional comfort to people who then have already made the decision up front. It enhances self-image. It increases psychological investment in the relationship. So that's hopefully what people can take away about the place of purpose. I'll just finish this by saying, to the point of where the research is pointing, we're not saying that purpose is doing the heavy lifting of driving consideration. That's what mental and physical availability are for, and that's where brands should invest. But it does the three things I just mentioned exceptionally well, in a way that other brand attributes may not. So values-based elimination, emotional differentiation, rich material for defensibility of your choice over time. So it's not that whether purpose has a role, it's how are you deploying it in a way that creates value rather than expecting it to work like traditional marketing. So I'll get off my podium, but I'm hoping that came through, the three things to think about, and that it's not doing the heavy lifting of driving consideration. I'm curious how the others are feeling about what I've shared here.
Thank you. That really resonates with me, with my background when we were plotting customer journey and where people were looking. And the fact that with B2B, often you don't know that somebody is researching you and they've done a lot before they even make the first approach. So where are you putting that material? It's not necessarily normal sort of campaign activity, but where's your impact report? What is sitting on your website? Those more classic places where people go to do that deeper research. Thank you. Dave, is that the same in your experience?
I think it's spot on. I mean, I think Ty can write a manual on it right now. I just think that's a really powerful, clear, effectiveness linked set of guiding principles, if you like, how to use purpose in B2B. All I would really add to that is the 95-5 rule. If only 5% of our audience are in the market for our product or service at any other time, what are we going to say to them? They need something that's going to grab their attention, grab their interest, draw them in, that's going to educate, inform, enlighten, that's going to start to hit those emotional cues. You can do a lot worse than authentic purpose content for that to help with that 95-5 gap. Whether that's brand messaging or storytelling or advocacy campaigns or even thought leadership, if you really are doing the groundwork. Yes, it's got to be authentic. Yes, there needs to be some connection, some coherence to the product service. It needs to have some value element to it, right? Not just be completely sort of removed from the needs, concerns of the buyer. But I think if you can connect those dots, I think purpose is such a powerful well to draw from when you're in that 95-5 bubble going, so what did we talk about? That's not the product or the service. But yeah, and that really complements what you were saying as well, Ty.
Thank you. So we're talking about allowing to make defensible decisions and also getting that information out there. Thomas, I wonder, when we're talking to audiences, who are the most important stakeholders that B2B marketers need to think about making sure their message lands?
I think what purpose and some of these conversations can do is sometimes reach a new audience. So it's a possibility to grow. And even if we look at the B Corp movement and how that has grown, I think again, probably some of the most successful B Corps have actually been the smaller ones. It's again difficult for the big ones. The purchasing decision is just different, and I think Ty spoke about it, right? It's we're not in a B2C market where you need to stand out on shelf. It's a longer decision cycle. It's a much more complex one. But I do see that those companies that dare to stand out. I mean, let me go to banking, because banking is just a product that has little to no differentiation left whatsoever, right? I mean, let's be honest. And there's a couple of banks, like three others in Holland. There's one in Denmark called Merkur, and basically what they've been so good at is just saying, we are a bank for everybody who believes in a sustainable tomorrow, which means that none of our executives are getting high pay. I think the CEO of the bank gets 2.5, the lowest employee. So a very, very fair remuneration for a bank CEO. They probably could get a lot more to going for, Goldman Sachs or something else. But just also the value pitch. I mean, I met with the guys at Merkur, and they have a completely different type of conversation, because people choose them because they are value aligned, and so I do really believe that, because when a lot of this sort of there's a pressure from big business and downwards. And so if all of these big businesses are to deliver on the goals and promises, it will land on somebody's table at some point. And so being differentiated and being clear about who you're there for, I think is really clever. You can be an insurance company that target a specific type of demographic. You don't have to cater for everyone. And that's what I love absolutely about brands. Brands are loved, strong brands are loved and hated, and so you can put a lot of love into these small SME brands by choosing purpose and living it well.
Thank you. I take your point on different audiences. I've just noticed Trudos advertising when I'm watching films at the moment, so they're certainly upping their ante, and I love that. Not just different audiences, but also different conversations. Ty, does that resonate with you?
It does, yeah. So a number of different stakeholders that we're speaking to broadly. And, I think that there are probably two that I would call out as being like critical as you think about B2Bs. Of course, there's the buying committee that I just referred to. It's the groups of people making these important decisions. And there are different types of audiences within the buying committee to consider. So we know the buying committee numbers are expanding, which I think makes the role of brand all the more important, because you want people to have positive associations as they're considering, and be able to talk fluently as they're making the decision. But most of the energy in B2B is directed towards what we call the target buyers. These are the people that we download the reports. They're like very highly visible because they're the people we talk to every single day. We have the most information on these people. They're the people who probably will recognize the purpose framing and kind of have more of a deeper understanding of that. But there's also another group of stakeholders that we should be thinking about. And these are the hidden influencers that have that 50% decision-making power. This is like legal, finance, HR, procurement, and any of these people can torpedo a decision. All right. They want to make sure that that's where like the risk mitigation aspect comes in. They want to be able to defend it to the board. They want to know, does this align with our compliance? And that's where I think the broader conversation about purpose is helpful, because these hidden influential folks are increasingly values driven. Over 2/3 of buyers are now millennials and Gen Z, and they're asking purpose questions that predecessors haven't asked. right? So I think that's one. And then the other one I would underscore is just going back to like that post-purchase rationalization. And part of that is just your current customers. So there's research that shows that recommendations from people like me are more influential than price and performance. So people want to know the answer to, have you worked with this company? Like, what do you think about them? And that conversation, again, increasingly includes values judgments. So like, they're solid, they walk the walk, or it could be like great product, but did you see that thing in the news? Like, these are very real conversations that people have, and people want to feel good about the brands they're connected to and investing in.
Thank you. I think from my own experience, I'm also just thinking about those hidden influencers, people who are non-exec directors or trustees on boards. They often sit on more than one board, so they kind of bring those learnings. They also very, very conscious of the governance and then the reputational side. And so I know when I've been in a CMO role trying to justify to a board, I often get asked questions about what do we know about them? Have they done this? I probably ask those questions myself now. And there is that space for them to have that broader recognition. So don't forget your boards either as another audience. I also just thinking back, and when we were chatting about this before we started, this question of differentiation. And I know from my own experience, we would say we need to talk about our purpose because it will differentiate us in the market and make a big case internally. And when you get out there, sometimes you realize that everybody else in your category is giving the same message. So if all these SMEs are, and the bigger businesses maybe, are claiming to be purpose-led, how do you stand out in the market for something that is subtly different? Sorry, Thomas, love to hear your view on that.
I mean, the one thing I looked at was how well you are delivering it. I mean, one of the key questions I ask in my book, The Hero Trap, is who can you help your customers become? So are you actually helping your customers in that journey? Can they feel it? If you promise them health, if you are Merkur, the bank that I spoke about before, how do you make sure that your customers become much more aware of how their money are being spent, what they're investing in, and they can feel and they can see that change. So I think that's what sort of delivers the authenticity. And I think there's another thing that does make this a little bit more risky because sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to come out of a B2B contract or come out of that relationship. I mean, growing up in the creative industry, Apple for me was one of those pivotal brands that I just bought into. You know, when I and one of my first agencies could run around with that little, white and blue designed laptop that just like looked like it looked more like a handbag than a laptop, let's be honest. And today, when we do see Apple and when we see a lot of the other tech titans cozy up to the US government, do I want to get out of Apple? Oh, yeah, any day. Do I have an alternative? No, I don't actually. I can't find anywhere where I have the same sort of ecosystem and same sort of delivery. So I think that also sometimes matters when we talk about B2B decisions, that I feel that even where you're web hosting, all these things, these are bigger decisions, and with that comes a lot of risk. So for me, any sustainability decision about sort of a low beam or high beam, and I think you want to have that high beam where you take a lot of you ask yourself a lot of tough questions in terms of before you go into that customer relationship, and if there's more yes in terms of value alignment, in terms of being risk aware, then I think you've done a good decision.
Thank you. Dave, you're obviously advising lots of clients on this and how they can differentiate. What advice would you give?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, we all know that B2B has a differentiation problem generally, right? Most B2B brands aren't overly differentiated, and are a little bit slow to catch on. I find myself regularly advising purpose-driven B2B companies not to differentiate around purpose, which might seem counterintuitive, right? And it was interesting when we did the research, 85% of leaders said that they wanted their purpose to be a differentiator for the brand. And I love the aspiration. And I think what I often find myself saying to leaders is, great, Let's align what you're best at with what your customers need the most, with what your competitors are doing the least. If that equation all lines up to purpose, go for it. If it doesn't, don't lead with purpose. Don't Purpose isn't going to be the lead differentiator. It's not going to be what you position the brand around. I will go back to what Ty said a few minutes ago and what I said a few minutes ago. There are amazing places, opportunities where purpose can be really powerful within your overall brand messaging, within your content strategy, within campaigns, within for awareness raising. I sometimes feel that B2B leaders are trying to make a quick buck. Just go, right, well, if we differentiate on purpose, we'll win, right? And I don't think it's always that straightforward. And in fact, that may be not even the right strategy.
I would actually disagree there, Dave.
Go for it.
I do actually think that, B2B historically and traditionally has been a more conservative industry. And it's one of those industries that I think haven't applied marketing to its fullest. You know, no matter how we want to look at it and how much we want to sort of squeeze, and I talked about it before, how much we want to squeeze B2B brands into this sort of rational box. By the end of the day, B2B, B2C, it's the same thing. How does this brand make you feel? Do I feel good about buying into this brand? And I think this is where there is that missed opportunity that can you apply like a really strong emotional argument? I mean, when I look back in my career and I saw The Economist, the classic, I'm a copywriter, so sorry about bringing this example up here, but the good old copyright for the Economist that said management trainee. I never read The Economist, 42 years old. You know, that just says it all, right? I mean, and I know that if you go to Cannes Lions, the big advertising festival, I'm so happy to see much more strong B2B, emotionally driven work that comes out there. And if I look to sort of my region, the Nordics, I think why a lot of our Nordic companies are doing so well is because they dare to be bold around a lot of this stuff. And I can give you a really, really boring industry, paper and pulp. It doesn't become more boring than that, which would normally be just about price and delivery. And a lot of those companies now can talk about sort of rethinking materials. They can move into textiles, so they can take some of that wood pulp, turn into amazing textiles. That just adds a lot more sexiness to a product that really wasn't that sexy. And I remember I've been to a paper and pulp trade show, and they had a catwalk, with models and in amazing dresses made out of wood pulp. And then next to these guys, you have like these sort of roller things and the usual things, and it just touches on emotions. And I think we shouldn't forget that in the B2B space. I really do think that as anything else in advertising and marketing, be bold, be emotional. It is still the one that sort of gives you that, I feel good about buying this brand. That's why I bought Apple to begin with. I felt good about it.
Thanks, Thomas. I wonder, Ty, you've just talked about the customer journey or the buying journey. Where else do you see that purpose shows up in the broader sort of marketing space, for example, product development?
Yeah, but I definitely want to just go back just for a second, and just because I think that the conversation about B2B and differentiation and distinction, B2B tends to be an asset poor environment in general. So I think we can all agree that there's a major opportunity there for us to turn up the dial on memorability. We have seen wonderful campaigns, award-winning campaigns at Lions that have led with this. I think, the decision for brands, I think, is based, on your strategy and the different buying situations you can identify that people can really grab onto. I also think that whether or not you lead with purpose, if you find that to be a real opportunity, purpose does need to be findable when stakeholders go looking. So that means like having clear information, employee voices, customer stories. It needs to be validated. But I think it's like, let the different stakeholders find the different value, do the work, the strategy work to identify whether or not that's going to be a buying situation that makes sense for you to invest in given your resources, because you might have a product champion that doesn't really care about carbon neutrality. So I guess the point being, like, look for, where, if you're going to compete, where you can be credible, where it's competitive, and where there is enough of a commercial value to ultimately drive that decision making on what you lead with. Where purpose can play a role, we need it to be findable. Okay, so now, sorry, I wanted to pause there because I didn't want to skip over that. I wanted to connect it back to what I shared earlier. So I think your question is about, sorry, Elaine, can you remind me of the question?
Well, I think you might have already just answered it actually, because
Right. Okay.
I'll just give you just
Okay.
it was beyond the buying journey, maybe where else, if you like, in the full marketing spectrum. And I wondered about product development.
Yes,
Just
yes,
answered
yes,
that question anyway. So
sure.
brilliant. I wonder whether this is a good moment to, before our last question, just to open the floor up to questions. And there's just one question here. When many brands are trying to differentiate around purpose, do B2B brands need to be bolder and more creative, like B2C campaigns? So does B2B, you've just been talking about Cannes Lions. I wonder maybe if there was something that stood out for you there as an example of a real, you talked about brilliant campaigns. Perhaps you could share some examples from there that you thought did that well.
I'll start. I mean, I think the answer is yes. Distinctive brand assets are, I think, one of the most underutilized investment spaces that B2B brands should be investing in. Even on a small budget, a bold, creative expression can pull a lot of weight and deliver a lot of the results, even when you're competing against these large brands. So I think that's a huge area, but that means like thinking about, using things like characters, fonts, logos, this constellation of how you show up, which is inclusive of purchase, sorry, not purchase, purpose, in that set. Thomas, I think you talked about the Pinatex campaign as being an example. That was an award-winning Lions campaign, and there have been a number of other campaigns that have led with purpose that have been, just fantastic and very memorable execution. So they brought that into the boldness of their expression. Thomas, you probably have far more examples given your studies.
I mean, it is a little bit easier play. I think, to be honest, it's also only recently that Cannes Lions actually did have the B2B lines, which kind of also shows that there's a space that's been a little bit behind the B2C space. And so I think the SMEs actually do quite a good job, again, compared to big B2B companies in general. But just like it is basically just, if you're a B2B brand, look at what the B2C brands does really, really well. I mean, are your B2B communications today emotional, or is it too rational? I mean, we still, no matter what, still does our little gut feeling check at the very beginning of our purchasing journey. There might be some tougher questions coming down the road, as Ty mentioned. But so I think we need to lead with that. And then secondly, I think what at least have happened in my lifetime in advertising is that products are becoming more and more similar, and does seem to be a much more challenging space today. We see that at telcos as well, right? It's so difficult to differentiate. I mean, when I started working with telcos 20 years ago, they might have 100,000 different products on the shelves. They just don't have that anymore. It's it's a phone line. There might be a couple of other things. That's it, right? So it's a lot easier to buy a lot of B2B products today, and I think tech has enabled that as well. And so I think that puts that emotional argument much more front and center today than it was before, because it was a much more difficult purchasing decision. I actually do like B2B companies, especially startups, that makes it very easy for me with the click of a button to buy this B2B product, whether, instead of me having to call a Siemens or someone else, I, with the click of the button, can get energy efficiency or whatever it is. So I really do think that the best thing people can do is really to look at the best B2C practices, and see what they do, how they touch people, how they differentiate, rather than just mentioning a couple of B2B brands. Yeah.
Dave?
Yeah, well, I'd like to answer one of the other questions actually, that I've seen, if that's all right.
Hang on, you're ahead of me. Loads of questions are coming now. Hang on, then. Do you want to go for that one, Dave?
From Emma, with brands becoming more intentional, less vocal about climate and purpose, how can they balance doing the work with communicating it credibly? Yeah, and I think that's a great it's a great question, and it's a good example of what I think leaders are wrestling with. In the research, we we sort of did a bit of a layering, and we asked leaders, do you want to comply? Do you want to care? Do you want to communicate? And then kind of leaders were sort of able to say, oh, well, this is sort of where I feel we're at, the business at. But I think those layers are perhaps a helpful way of thinking about it. Like there's the comply layer, which is like, it's not a conversation, right? Just there's a baseline now which every business needs to meet social environmental standards, which are non-negotiable, really. You've then got that care layer, which goes, okay, well, what are the things that we really care about as a business, as a workforce, as a leadership, as an ownership? What are the things that really we want to get behind and do? And then, whoa, I've got a lot of light coming in, apologies. And then finally, that's the communicate layer. And what are the things that there is value in us shouting about, communicating, whether that's brand messaging, campaigns, thought leadership case studies, and perhaps some of the confusion has happened where some businesses are just like, what's the bare minimum I can do? Can I even get away without complying? And others have gone to every single thing that we care about, we have to shout about. But I think it's worth thinking through those layers and going, well, where are we at with the work that we're doing, some of the issues? What do we actually have to comply about? What do we really care about? Do the work, and then what is that final layer? Where's the real value in we can have cut through, we can really have some impact in shouting about, communicating.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the questions now. There's so many good ones in here. There was one, I've just lost it now. Here we go. This is from Gordon. If a B2B brand talks about purpose in one area, are they expected to have a position on every area, subject, cause? And if so, does this scare people from declaring any position? I think it's that sense of sometimes people think purpose is DE&I. People think purpose is sustainability. People think purpose is something else. I wonder which of you might like to answer that question.
I'm happy to, just from the research, because it came up. In short, Gordon, yes and yes. So yes, that is one of the reasons why leaders sometimes do get a bit scared off purpose or find it a bit risky. And no, I think if there is something that's good that's going to come out of this, Thomas talked about it being a great time for purpose because it's in the news. I also think it's a good time for purpose because I think there's an alignment that's happening and leaders are realizing, oh, okay, maybe we don't have to have a position, a stance, and be vocal on every single issue, but let's actually choose the ones that we do care about and are doing something about, and let's really double down on those. And I think if we can get away from almost this tick box kind of approach to purpose, going, what's the next social environmental issue on the list that we need to say we're totally behind and have an issue on? And again, you might for compliance reasons, but actually, if you don't have to for compliance reasons, don't force it, but really double down on the ones that you really care about and actually can get some real mileage out of. So, and I think that's the shift that's happening, or at least we're picking up from some conversation.
That's back to your
I think for me, it's what is the absolute failure of the climate movement? That one question, because perfection becomes the enemy of progress, and I think we put ourselves up in that corner, unfortunately. That that we ourselves have almost created this thing where, oh, but the company needs to be perfect on all these different aspects, and we can't. And that is the dilemma, right? I mean, you can if you wanna excel on carbon emissions and you're a fashion company, you can stay with polyester t-shirts. But but so there's so many inherent dilemmas and complexities in this space. So I really do think this is a space now to lead with what you're wholeheartedly good at. And and if climate is your thing, then go ahead with that. Absolutely fine. You know, and and uh, and I know there's challenges. I tend to advise my clients to say, to just be honest about those things that you're not great at. So if you're able to um, source your product and make, if you make a product locally, then maybe the social issue thing might not look as good. And so just be honest about where that balancing act is at. I mean, with fashion, for example, we worked with companies where they were 99% there on sourcing their clothing from Europe, 1% came from India, some knits and stuff. Be honest about that. Absolutely fine. You can't solve all of this stuff by tomorrow. But yeah, one focus. I think the greatest brands stand for one thing. Volvo is safety. So aim for that. Aim for that one thing you want to champion, and then just be honest about those things where you have shortcomings.
Thank you. I've just got one last question for Ty. Ty, this is a question from Joe, and I think it links really well to your buying journey. If every B2B brand claims a higher purpose, how do we tell who is genuinely driven by impact versus who's just marketing it?
Yeah, great question. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, right? And so it goes back to it's not just words. I think the embedding of the work into the business is key here. There are a lot of brands that have said these are the things that we're going to do. These are the things we're going to invest in. And there's a real dissonance or a breakdown. That's not just with the way that customers look, but it's the way the employees see and feel. It's the connection between on the signal that you said that gets amplified by people who can really see the work that's happening within the brand. And more people are analyzing that, I think, over the past few years, where we've seen, a large number of brands years ago said, like, this is what we stand for and this is what we're doing. And now that's not the case. And I think that for those brands, there can be an erosion of trust when it comes to that. So I do think it's important. And I do think that it's something that builds over time, like a train picking up speed. I was just scrolling through LinkedIn this morning, for example, and I know this isn't a B2B example, but Dove has as a part of their Real Beauty campaign, has another message out that's about change the compliment. And it's about this idea that people give women and girls the compliment of, oh, you're so beautiful. And it's advocating for, like, the fact that we should be telling women that you're courageous, you're strong, you're more than that. But it fits very well into their overall message that they've been investing in over time, to the point where I don't think anyone would question that what Dove champions. The signal is so strong. So what we want to do is avoid the breakdown and dissonance, and continue to maintain that signal on the message, but proving it through how you show up. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. I think from my own experience, it was knowing that you can find the data. If somebody asks you, particularly, we're on a panel today, often B2B will find themselves on panels. Have you got the data? Can you back it up with real hard evidence? Thank you very much, all. I have got one very last question to wrap up. I had written down some summary notes as kind of what are the key takeouts, but I can see we're against time. I did say right at the start, this would be about hands, not heads. So from each of you, if there's just one thing that you wanted to leave for the marketeers that they should do if they're nervous about putting their head above the parapet in their organization to support their organization to talk about purpose, what's the one thing you would suggest they do?
I could be very quick with this one. It applies whether B2B, B2C. We need courage. We need boldness. Else you might as well go work in a bank. You shouldn't be working in marketing if you're not bold.
Brilliant. Thank you, Thomas. Ty?
Yeah, I think just repeating again, the ones that are doing it right aren't the ones with the most campaigns, or the ones where it's so woven into operations, product, customer experience, it becomes inseparable from how you're delivering value.
Thank you. And Dave?
Yeah, I'm with Thomas. It's not a question of if, it's a question of how. Find the right fit. Find your cause, your issues, the audience, the opportunities, the channels, the content, and go for it. But yeah, it's not a question of if, it's just a question of how.
Brilliant. Great place to end. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Some of you live, some of you hopefully will be watching this afterwards. And thank you very much to Ty, to Thomas, and to Dave for all your valuable insights today. Thank you very much.